Every time the sun comes up, you promise yourself today will feel lighter. Yet as soon as your eyes focus on the ceiling, a thin current of dread has already claimed the air. Nothing dramatic happens. The coffee machine hums, your phone pings, the neighborhood settles into its usual rhythm. But your chest interprets an invisible signal. Brace. You navigate the morning almost on autopilot, adjusting your tone in meetings, scanning gestures, measuring silence like a seasoned seismologist, waiting for the tremor that never quite arrives, yet always might. Friends tell you you're overthinking. Professionals remind you the danger has passed, and logically you agree. Still, your pulse does not. That is the riddle we'll untangle together. Carl Jung argued that what we refuse to face in consciousness resurfaces as fate, arranging our choices, feelings, and even the storyline of our lives without asking permission. When childhood included fear, whether loud, chaotic, or chillingly quiet, those unprocessed impressions became architects of our adult nervous system. You can finish school, land a job, build a family, even study psychology, yet an old alarm keeps echoing in the corridors of the body, insisting the world is unpredictable. The result is less like a scream, more like a persistent, low-frequency note that shapes every room you walk into. Modern neuroscience now verifies what depth psychology hypothesized a century ago. Trauma reorganizes the brain regions responsible for threat detection and emotional regulation. Functional MRI studies show heightened activity in the amygdala and reduced integration in the medial prefrontal cortex long after the event ends, explaining why reassurance rarely reaches the places where fear still sits. The mind files the past as completed, but the body treats it as open-ended. That gap is where many feel stuck, no longer in danger, yet never entirely safe. To illustrate, picture a child who tiptoes through a home ruled by unpredictable moods. One night the house is calm, the next voices escalate without warning. The child's developing nervous system adapts by reading micro-expressions like a code breaker, cataloging patterns that might predict conflict. Fast forward 20 years. The same person receives an email with a vague subject line from a supervisor, and their stomach flips. The adult brain recognizes it's just text on a screen, but the child's neural wiring still scans for hidden volatility. This reflex is not evidence of weakness. It's the body defending an inner timeline that never found closure. Fear, then, becomes a lifestyle more than an episode. It shapes posture, shoulders slightly raised, breath subtly shallow, startle reflex primed. It also edits personality. Some cope by perfecting every detail, believing flawlessness will keep storms away. Others detach, hovering behind a cool facade, convinced invisibility equals safety. Jung named such adaptive masks the persona, a social costume that hides whatever feels unlovable. Over time, the disguise receives applause. You're so capable, you never complain. And that praise inadvertently cements the belief that authenticity is a liability. The true cost surfaces in private moments: insomnia, emotional numbness, the nagging doubt that intimacy will expose something unacceptable. Yet inside that tension sits latent power. Jung wrote that within every neurosis lies a portion of potentiality not yet lived. Fear speaks the language of protection, but encoded in its message is a roadmap toward wholeness once we learn to listen without judgment. Transforming that relationship requires two simultaneous movements: widening cognitive understanding and, just as crucially, teaching the nervous system how safety feels. Talking alone rarely dissolves somatic memory. The body speaks in sensation, breath, and movement, so the antidote must engage those channels directly. Before exploring practical steps, let's demystify one more hidden mechanism: the complex. Imagine a cluster of emotionally charged memories orbiting a central theme: rejection, humiliation, abandonment. The moment current reality resembles that theme, the cluster activates like a fast-loading program, flooding the body with the chemistry of the past. You may know better, yet your reactions proceed anyway. Recognizing you are in a complex rather than wrong or broken shifts the narrative from self-criticism to compassionate inquiry. Something old was triggered. What does it need? This mental reframe lays critical groundwork for the methods we'll practice shortly. Another misconception worth dismantling is the pursuit of fearless living. Eliminating fear is neither possible nor wise. Fear evolved as an essential guardian. The goal is calibrated fear, responsive rather than chronic, informative rather than tyrannical. Picture a smoke alarm recalibrated to signal real flames, not every burnt piece of toast. Healing is that recalibration. With context established, let's step into the experiential terrain. 7 integrative approaches that help loosen fear's grip without resorting to brute willpower. They weave depth psychological insight with contemporary somatic research, creating a bridge between unconscious imagery and cellular memory. Treat them less as sequential tasks and more as complementary practices you can rotate based on circumstance. Begin with a micro-ritual of presence that anchors mind and body in the same time frame. Choose a daily activity you already perform, washing your hands, locking the door, settling into a chair. During that minute, bring full attention to texture, temperature, and gravity. Feel water over skin, metal against fingertips, weight on the seat. Silently remind yourself, right now, this is the only moment. This simple tether conditions your sensory system to orient toward current stimuli instead of defaulting to historic threat patterns. Repetition matters more than duration. Short, consistent doses teach the vagus nerve to associate routine acts with calm. Complement that grounding with vocal vibration. Humming a low, continuous tone while exhaling extends the breath and stimulates the vagal pathways that downshift heart rate. You can experiment alone in the car, in the shower, or during a walk. The resonance not only soothes the nervous system, it also counters the freeze response by reintroducing gentle movement to the diaphragm and throat, areas that often constrict when fear is internalized. Over weeks, many notice an expanded capacity to voice opinions externally as the throat learns internally that sound can be safe. Next, practice titrated exposure to sensations you usually dodge. If quiet rooms spike anxiety because silence once preceded conflict, start by dimming household noise for just 30 seconds, noticing rising tension without labeling it danger. Follow with a regulating action, perhaps sipping warm tea or stretching. Gradually extend the silence window. This pendulation between mild discomfort and self-soothing rewires prediction circuitry, teaching the body it can venture out of vigilance and still return unharmed. Touch, though often underrated, is a fundamental regulator. Pressing a palm against the sternum or giving yourself a gentle shoulder squeeze releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, signaling the limbic system that support is present. If physical contact once felt unsafe, start with an object, a weighted blanket, a soft stone kept in your pocket. The key is consistent, paired association, sensation plus inner acknowledgement such as, I'm here with you. Over time, the companionship once absent in childhood becomes internally supplied, reducing the compulsion to seek or avoid others reflexively. Co-regulation with a trusted person, or even a calm pet, amplifies this effect. Spend moments of shared stillness where no problem-solving occurs, just synchronized breathing or quiet presence. Studies show heart rate variability aligns between individuals during empathic connection, fortifying the parasympathetic state. If human relationships feel daunting, begin with animals or guided group meditations where intimacy is structured and brief. Then translate that safety template to closer bonds. Somatic journaling introduces cognitive ownership without intellectual override. Instead of analyzing events, you map sensations. Buzzing behind eyes, tight ring around stomach, heat in cheeks. Next, ask the sensation what it fears and what it needs using first-person language. I'm buzzing because I expect criticism. I need reassurance that mistakes don't equal exile. Finally, write one supportive sentence back. Criticism now is feedback, not danger. I'll stay with you. This dialogue surfaces unconscious beliefs while physically naming their location, uniting story and flesh. The final practice invites imaginative reparenting. Visualize your younger self in a setting where fear peaked, maybe standing in a doorway anticipating an argument. Rather than replaying the scene, insert your current adult figure arriving with calm authority. Picture offering a hand, leading the child to a well-lit room, explaining what happened was never their fault. Allow the child to express anger, sadness, or confusion, responding with validation. Research on neuroplasticity shows that vividly imagined corrective experiences can lay down neural networks almost as effectively as real ones, giving the previously isolated memory a new relational context. Implementing these approaches will likely surface resistance. Progress is rarely linear. Some days the old fog returns thicker than before. When that happens, remember Jung's notion of enantiodromia, the idea that any extreme state eventually tends toward its opposite. The surge of fear you feel may actually signal the psyche swinging toward equilibrium, not away from it. Hold the paradox. Relapse can be rehearsal for resilience. Let's contextualize with an everyday scenario. You're at work, the supervisor calls for an impromptu meeting. Heart rate climbs, mouth dries. Instead of rehearsing catastrophe, you discreetly place one hand over your ribcage under the table, exhale with a gentle hum. That's presence plus vocal vibration. In the meeting, if tension persists, mentally note sensations: throat tight, forehead hot. Later, you jot them in your journal, answering their need, maybe clarity about expectations, then email your boss for concrete feedback. By evening, you practice reparenting, picturing yourself at 8, waiting outside a principal's office, telling them, an adult's evaluation doesn't define your worth. Through such small loops, old wiring gradually seeds authority to new. An essential companion on this journey is the attitude of kind curiosity. Condemning fear for overstaying its welcome merely adds another layer of threat. Instead, treat each flare-up as a smoke signal from your history. Ask, which part of me is speaking? How old does it feel? What would soothe it right now? This stance fulfills Jung's prescription for dialogue between conscious ego and unconscious content, a dialogue where respect replaces domination. Cultural narratives often complicate matters by praising stoicism and shaming vulnerability, especially for men and certain marginalized groups. If you grew up absorbing messages that emotions equal weakness, acknowledging fear may initially intensify shame. Recognize this second emotion is socially conditioned, not inherent. When shame arises, direct the same practices toward it: grounding, gentle touch, co-regulation. Over time, you'll notice shame melts fastest when met with the very softness it was trained to despise. Scientific evidence continues to support these integrative methods. A 2024 randomized study at the University of Geneva found that participants combining somatic grounding with daily self-compassion phrases showed a 38% reduction in physiological stress markers compared to a control group practicing cognitive reframing alone. Meanwhile, researchers at UCLA demonstrated that humming at 120 Hz for 5 minutes boosted vagal tone as effectively as traditional chanting. Such data affirms what many feel anecdotally. Healing accelerates when body and psyche collaborate. Skeptics may wonder whether imagination or self-talk can truly recalibrate neural pathways sculpted by years of adversity. Consider the phenomenon of phantom limb pain, where absent body parts still hurt because neural maps retain their memory. Therapists now treat this by having patients mirror watch an intact limb move, convincing the brain the missing limb is free of pain. The ache often subsides. If visual illusion can modulate nerve signals in that context, guided imagery certainly can reshape emotional circuits. It's also important to differentiate between self-directed practices and professional intervention. If fear manifests as panic attacks, debilitating flashbacks, or suicidal ideation, collaborate with a trauma-informed therapist. These tools then become adjuncts, not replacements, for expert care. The very act of seeking help is itself corrective. It disproves the childhood lesson that you must face terror alone. As you integrate new habits, track subtle victories. Maybe you sleep half an hour deeper, laugh spontaneously without checking the room first, or notice your shoulders settling while cooking. Celebrate each marker. The brain's reward system reinforces behaviors acknowledged with even small doses of pride, releasing dopamine that motivates repetition. Over months, these micro-accomplishments accumulate into structural change, a process analogous to compound interest, but measured in confidence rather than currency. At some point, you'll likely encounter what therapists call an extinction burst. The old pattern spikes fiercely before dissolving, similar to a candle flaring just before it dies. You might feel disheartened, believing progress was an illusion. Frame this instead as the complex's last-ditch attempt to preserve homeostasis. Respond by doubling down on gentleness, perhaps switching to a soothing playlist, walking outdoors, engaging supportive company. Resisting the urge to self-criticize during an extinction burst marks a pivotal leap from conditioned survival to conscious stewardship. Let's revisit Jung for perspective. He believed the psyche aims for individuation, a state where all parts, shadow, persona, anima, animus, gain a seat at the internal council. Fear from this angle isn't expelled, it's granted a vote, not veto power. That democratic model contrasts sharply with childhood environments where fear's vote was absolute. By redistributing authority among internal voices, you become akin to a wise chief who hears each tribe member yet chooses policy based on present reality, not ancestral panic. Another valuable lens is polyvagal theory, which maps three primary autonomic states: social engagement, fight-flight, and shutdown. Understanding this ladder clarifies why certain interventions work. Gentle eye contact or soft vocal tone invites the social engagement system. Vigorous exercise helps process fight-flight energy. Stillness and weighted blankets can release freeze. Knowing where you are on the ladder allows you to choose appropriate rungs rather than guessing in the dark. Environmental tweaks further support nervous system recalibration. Dim fluorescent lights can mimic dusk and cue relaxation. Certain scents like lavender or vetiver have mild anxiolytic properties, signaling the olfactory nerve pathways tied to memory. Even room temperature plays a role. Slightly cooler spaces encourage parasympathetic dominance during sleep. Small adjustments accumulate into conditions where new neural templates flourish. Technology offers both obstacles and aids. Endless scrolling can sustain vigilance through novelty overload, yet apps that guide breathing or track heart rate variability provide real-time feedback. Use such tools consciously. Set screen-free periods, treat metrics as curiosity rather than judgment, and prioritize embodied experience over digital reassurance. Community also acts as an amplifier. Consider forming or joining a group dedicated to mindful movement, trauma-sensitive yoga, or expressive writing. Collective practice not only normalizes the journey, but also broadens the range of nervous system cues your body interprets as safe. Diverse expressions of calm expand the template your brain uses to define security. Over the long term, the relationship with fear transforms from adversary to advisor. Imagine attending a conference with multiple speakers. Fear's lecture arrives, you take notes, but you also attend resilience's talk, creativity's workshop, rest's panel. The conference of self becomes richer, less dominated by a single voice. Eventually, you might even thank fear for alerting you early to unhealthy dynamics, for propelling you toward self-knowledge, for sharpening empathy toward others' hidden battles. When that gratitude feels genuine, you'll notice an emergent freedom, the capacity to approach new opportunities without sabotaging them, to remain in stillness without unease, to set boundaries without apology. These shifts may appear subtle externally, yet internally they mark a seismographic change in how energy is allocated, from constant vigilance to creative exploration. Before closing, let's weave everything into a brief visualization you can carry forward. Picture standing at the edge of a dense forest at dawn. Behind you lies the terrain of old experiences, where the ground felt unstable. Ahead, the path is shrouded in mist, but rays of light pierce through. You place a hand on your heart, a grounding cue, take a humming exhale and step onto the trail. With each footfall, feel the muscles in your legs absorbing information. The soil is firm, the air smells of pine, a bird sings overhead. You pause, sense a flutter of unease. That's the complex stirring. Instead of retreating, you greet it. I know why you're here. Stay close, but I'm leading now. Soon, a clearing appears with a circle of stones warm from first light. You sit, journal in the earth's margin. Buzzing in ribs, fear of missteps, request for patience. You place the journal down, imagine your younger self joining, grateful for company. Together you hum, matching tones until your bodies sync. When the sun climbs, you both rise, returning to the path, not fearless, but free to move in spite of fear. Should moments of relapse shadow you tomorrow, recall this forest. Repeat the practices in fragments if full rituals feel heavy. Healing is cumulative, not instant. Every compassionate repetition deposits resilience into your internal bank, interest compounding quietly, until one ordinary morning you notice the ceiling greets you without dread. The current of fear may still flow somewhere beneath, but it no longer steers the day. As you continue, share your discoveries. Commentaries from real journeys inspire others lingering at the trailhead to believe a different life is possible. If the ideas here resonate, consider liking, subscribing, and passing this video to someone whose inner alarm still rings. Together, we broaden the conversation Jung began, updating ancient wisdom with contemporary science, turning personal battles into communal evolution. Your story, once ruled by fear, can become testimony that the unconscious made conscious not only loses control, it gains purpose.